Here, but it's a nice one. All right. The Mishnah begins. Okay. So you have to know 2 points. The first point that you have to know is that that you could unsubscribe and subscribe to a Carbon Pesach, but once everybody subscribed to a Carbon Pesach, you can't have everyone in that group unsubscribe. Okay, you can't everybody, because then at one point, at one moment, this Carbon Pesach is all alone without any owner. So if you want to unsubscribe, you need to leave one person on the group still. In other words, so let's say you got a group together, and then the group wants to break up. One person needs to be remaining on the Carbon Pesach. So the Mishnah is going to deal here with a serious problem. Yeah, look at this picture, and this is the whole picture. You got 2 groups, red and blue, and they got 2 groups that they got their Carbon Pesachs mixed up, okay? And the problem over here is they cannot say you take this one, I take that one. Let's say it was actually mixed up, so that means they'll be eating from a Carbon Pesach they would not subscribe to, and they cannot unsubscribe and join one Pesach, because they'll be unsubscribing totally from a Carbon Pesach, and it'll be a Carbon Pesach without an owner. So this is what the Mishnah's idea is. Look at this picture. They each choose a Carbon Pesach, all right? We don't know if it's theirs or not. Each choose a Carbon Pesach. And they say, the 4 guys say that to this one, and they choose one guy to switch sides, okay? The blue goes to the red team, and the red goes to the blue team. And they say to this guy, listen, I don't know, this Carbon Pesach that we chose, if it was yours, if this was the blue team's Carbon Pesach, then we resign our position on this Carbon Pesach and we're joining with you, okay? And if this was our Carbon Pesach, then you resign from this one and you join ours, and you get what they accomplished. They accomplished over here was that they didn't resign at one moment when there was nobody going to be on that Carbon Pesach. Okay? I hope everybody's clear.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. So very simple. So let's read it. And that half the Rashi in the page is that. Shtei chaburish nesarva peschem, two groups that their Carbon Pesach got mixed up. Elu moishchin lehem echad. Each one draws one Carbon Pesach to their side. The Elu moishchin, and this one draws lehen echad a Carbon Pesach to their side. Echad me'elu boloi etzel elu. One guy leaves his team and joins the other group. The echad me'elu boloi etzel elu, and one guy from his team goes to join the other group. Team. The kach heim oimer. The 4, say for example, say to that one person, Im shalanu hua pesach hazeh. If this was originally our Carbon Pesach and we chose correctly, so then just withdraw from your Carbon Pesach. Your hands should be withdrawn from your old Carbon Pesach and join the Nesa al Shalanu and join our Carbon Pesach. V'im shalahu ha-pesach. But if yours turns out to be the Carbon Pesach and this wasn't our Carbon Pesach, then we'll withdraw from ours, v'nimnim al shalach, and we'll join yours. And that way, the Carbon Pesach didn't have everybody unsubscribe for a moment with no owner on it. And that's a very big issue. Next. The next case is simple. You have 5 groups over here on my left. You have 5 groups, blue, red, green, brown, green, whatever, light green. They have 5 animals that got mixed up. You don't know who's is who. So you guessed right. Then everybody joins another team. One guy from each group joins another team. So there'll be a team of red, green, brown, light green, and blue on everybody. And they say, because if it turns out to be that this was the brown one, let's say number 1, then all of them are withdrawing from theirs and they're joining the brown guy. And if it turned out to be the green one, then all of them are withdrawing from theirs and they join the green. In other words, you're guaranteed when you do it this way that there's going to be one person who was the original owner of that sheep, of that.
But these examples work beautifully because it's 5 sheep and 5 people with 5 groups.
Beautiful.
But what are the chances that that's reality, that there's that there's the same amount of sheep with the same amount of people divided equally by the same amount of groups. I understand for learning purposes that it makes it easy, but is this reality?
Steve, that's brilliant. And the Gemara is going to say, why didn't we say that the case was 5 and 4? It's going to build up. The Gemara is going to ask that question. It's a brilliant question. And there's a specific reason why the Mishnah uses the case of 5, which is very simple. But look at this case. Okay, if you have 5 groups of 5 and 5, or 10 groups of 10.
No.
Right. So if you have 10 groups of 10, what do you do? Hold on. If you have 10 groups of 10, you do the same thing. Everybody leaves the group and joins up with each other. That's what they say. That's what they say. So that's the Gemara. That's very simple. Now, says the Mishnah, Shnayim shenis orvu peschayim. Oh, here's the other problem. Shnayim shenis orvu peschayim. Look at this case right over here. Right here. You have 2 people that had a mixed up of a carbon. Now they can't, and they each choose one side, and they can't withdraw, because if they withdraw for a moment, then this carbon, the one that they withdraw it from, is without an owner. Could be. So now they can't say, I'm going to join both of them. By the way, that's also a very important point. You can't be joined on 2 carbon Pesachs at the same time. You can only be joined. There's no overbook over here. You have to be joined on 1 carbon Pesach. So the Mishnah's idea is, if you have 1 and 1, so then each one has to get a partner to join him on his carbon Pesach. And then the next step would be they switch sides. And then he says like this. The blue goes to the red team and the red goes to the other side. Each one picked a stranger, and they say like this. If this was my carbon, because it got mixed up, so then I'm the owner, and I'm letting you join because you were originally on the red team. And if this was the red team's carbon and I got it wrong, then I'm withdrawing from mine and I'm joining yours. So that's the way he says it. And same thing over here. The red says the same thing. If this was my carbon, right, that means I mixed it up and now I'm on the right side of the choice, then this is my carbon. I'm not withdrawing, and you're withdrawing because you were originally on the blue team. You were originally on the other. I'm joining you on my team because you originally subscribed to the blue. Because originally, when you came on board, you were joining up with blue, not with me. So I'm joining you. You withdraw from the other one, and that's the way they work it out. And then the red one says, if I'm wrong, and this was originally blue, that means you're the original owner of this along with the blue guy. So then I'm withdrawing from mine and joining up with you. So that's basically, you get a teammate. Shnayim shenis arvu peschayim. Each one, 2 people got their Pesachs mixed up. So then they have to bring a partner. Each one draws the carbon to his side. Each one gets somebody from the street to join them. And this one gets somebody from the street to join him. This one goes to this guy, and this one goes to this one. In other words, they switch sides. So each one first gets a partner. So now there are 2 on each carbon, and then they switch sides. So first you get a partner, and then you switch side. And they say to each one, if this turns out to be the Pesach, my Pesach, so then you're on the wrong team. You should be unsubscribed from your original, and then you join mine. If it turns out that this was yours and I'm on the wrong team, so then my hand is withdrawn from mine, and I'm going to be joining your side. Okay, the Gemara discusses just something that was mentioned in the previous part of the Mishnah. I'll just briefly say what it's talking about. The Mishnah talked about before that you have a group, and the Mishnah discusses they lost the carbon Pesach. They lost the Carbon Pesach. So they told one guy, you try to find it, and we'll try. If you don't hear from you, we're going to bring a Carbon Pesach. So the guy, if they tell him, find and slaughter for us, right? And he says, you should do it for me if I'm delayed. In other words, we don't know who's going to be first. I'm going to find the old carbon that was lost, or you're going to find, or if I don't find it, then you're going to slaughter a new carbon on my behalf. So, and then what happened was he actually did find the old carbon, and you don't know who brought their carbon first. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah said that no one eats, both are burned, and all are exempt from Pesach Sheni. They're all exempt from Pesach Sheni because at the end of the day, they're on one carbon. You just don't know which one it is. So you don't know, did he join his group, or that the other one, the singular guy joined his previous group. But if they didn't say anything to each other, then they're not joining up with each other's group. And therefore the Mishnah says, if you look at the Mishnah, they eat theirs and he eats his, they have no problem. So what the Gemara is just trying to say, just one point over here, that sometimes it's better off never to say anything. Not to say anything, you're more successful. Because in the case when they don't say anything to each other, then they both can eat their Carbon Pesach. When they say something to each other, then if there's a doubt, they both have to, withdraw. Not withdraw, but basically they don't get to eat the Carbon Pesach. They're a Yotzi Carbon Pesach, but they cannot eat it because you don't know which one they're joined into. But that's just a side point. The Tanra Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, if they both said something, then they eat from the first one, whichever one was brought first. If they didn't say we're joining up with each other, so the Gemara just brings a point. This is a side point, and even if you don't know the Mishnah, but you can know this point. Chachamim always have this idea. It's good to be silent. Smart people are good to be silent. Certainly, somebody who's not so smart, he's best off to be silent. Because there's a pasuk that says in Mishlei, Gam evil machrish, if a foolish person is silent, chacham yechashev, you consider him smart. So that's a sign of somebody. It's always good to be very silent and weigh your words carefully. I once had Rabbi Hershel Schechter, Rabbi in Share. Rabbi Hershel Schechter. He's a
yes, of course.
Right. So he was. They had a YU Shabbos, and the rabbi asked me if I could host Rabbi Schechter for Shabbos. It was very nice. I would loved it. So I had him here for Shabbos. So you would think that you have such a great person, and he's here sitting at your table, and he would be talking experiences. He didn't say one word from the whole Shabbos. It was absolute, complete, and utter silence. And but I understood why, because his wife does a lot of talking. His wife is a very talkative person, but I understand. Chacham Yechashev he's more of a listener. Although he gives a lot of shiurim, he's much more of a listener, and that's always stuck with me that the silence that I had in my Shabbos meals was great. Anyway, we learned that two people that mixed up the group. Like Rabbi Yehuda. Let us say our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, because there's an opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says that the only way, I told you something very important, that you cannot withdraw unless you leave somebody from the original group on the Carbon Pesach. But not just the original group. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is the guys that were there at the purchase of the animal. At the purchase of the animal, they have to be one person from the original purchase of the animal should be on the original group. So in this case, by the way, over here, what you see over here is this black over here was not part of the original group. The original group was blue and red. He brought him along, and then he switched sides. He withdrew from his and switched sides. So the black person still remains on the sheep, but he's not considered an original guy. Is that enough to be considered that you're allowed to withdraw because he wasn't part of the original group. Rabbi Yehuda seems to say not. That's what our Mishnah says. Lema masnisin like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, b'myimet habayis miyois meseh. You could withdraw from the Gemara is going to learn from this. You can withdraw from your carbon pesach as long as the animal is alive. I'm sure once it's slaughtered, you can't not, there's no backs. You can't withdraw. They charged your card. Balame, it teaches you shemismatin v'holchin. You could withdraw from the animal, from the group. Uvad, only on condition only one. The condition is that one from the original group that purchased the carbon should be around. Now, that's the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Aimer uvad shel nichas pesach k'mashihu. As long as you don't leave the carbon pesach without any owner, that's fine. It doesn't have to be the person that was from the original group. So it would seem that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Afilu Tema Rabbi Yehuda. You could say our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Kevin the Amar Rabbi Yehuda ain't sheichten as a Pesach al hayachid. Since Rabbi Yehuda says it's impossible, you're not allowed to have a carbon Pesach with just one owner on it. It cannot be. You have to have at least two. So in this case, when it was originally purchased, it was an unfinished carbon because they could not bring it. So therefore, when he joins, it's almost as if he was there at the purchase. That's what the Gemara is saying right now. The Gemara is saying, from the very beginning, you have to put somebody else onto that group. And therefore, he's considered like from the original group. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda has no problem with the blue withdrawing and leaving the black there, even though the black wasn't there at the purchase, but he was needed because the blue alone could not have bring that carbon pesach. So the black is almost like he's an original founder of the carbon pesach, and therefore that's Mishnah could even go according to Rabbi Yehuda. One final Gemara, and this will answer Steve's point. Amar of Ashi masnis nami dekid. Our Mishnah is very, very precise. Now, our Mishnah is precise that our Mishnah must only go according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because the Mishnah says v'chein chamesh chaburos shachamisha chamisha. So the Mishnah gave a case of 5-5, right? Like we said before. Now the question is, what Steve asked is, why couldn't you have this case where you have one group had 5 and one group had 4? Why didn't the Mishnah say that? So chamesh chaburos chamisha chamisha, it only works in a rare case of 5 groups of each one having 5. Shal chamisha en. But if you have one group has 5, and the other one has 4, it would not work. Why? Because because in this case, if you only had 4 over here, and you had 5 groups, so then how are you going to make it? The only way to make it work is if you bring somebody who wasn't there at the purchase, and then you spread the group around. But that wouldn't work according to Rabbi Yehuda, because there is a possibility that the only one on the animal was somebody that was not there from the original purchase. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that wouldn't work. If one group had 5, one group had 4, and you have to spread them all around, in order to spread them all around, you'd have to make the teams equal. So you'd have to bring another person from the outside in order to even up the teams. But by bringing that outsider in there, there's a possibility by spreading them all out, and each one is withdrawing. So the only one that remained from the group on the group was somebody who is not there at the purchase. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't have everybody withdraw if they were not there at the purchase. In other words, it has to be somebody who was there at the original purchase, still always remaining on that carbon throughout. Everybody else.
So the one with the 1 and the 1 wouldn't work either.
The Gemara says that the reason why the 1 and 1, because he automatically is considered as if he was part of the original purchase, because this 1 and 1 could never have brought the carbon pesach, because Rabbi Yehuda holds one person owning a carbon pesach is not enough. You cannot bring a carbon pesach.
Okay, so that's different. Okay.
So that's why the Gemara says that's different. That's what the Gemara says. I feel the Tame Rabbi Yehuda, that could be even Rabbi Yehuda ain't sheikhus pesach yochid. we originally counted that there's going to be another person joining that group. So he's considered, he's like one of the founder shares of something. He's like one of the founders. We finished Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni, as you said, the Masechta is divided into 3 parts, and this is the Pesach Sheni. And actually, there's some halachas of what this parak talked about, the halachas of Pesach Sheni. Now we come to a short daf and a nice, very beautiful parak. The parak boils down to talking about Kiddush and Havdalah. That's in the beginning for 7 block. We're going to learn a lot about Kiddush and Havdalah. Then Agadata. Then it talks about the Seder and Halal. Halal, and that's it. That's the whole parak. But I want to point out to you that over here, you have a version of Rashi over here. And then underneath, you have Rashbam. Rashbam is like Rashi, but with like an added dimension because it's more explanatory. It seems that Rashi went through a few versions. And what we see in the rest of the Masechta and throughout most Masechtas is that we see the final version of Rashi, which is, very explanatory. Here in Arvei Pesachim, because we didn't have the final edited version of Rashi, it's very, very precise, very brief. And therefore, in order to understand the Gemara, they added the Rashbam. And that became the go-to pirish, which basically is Rashi, but it adds a few questions and, understanding. Nobody had the precise way of explaining things like Rashi in the right words in the shortest amount of time. So the Rashbam is very long, as we'll see, and that's what makes all these blot in this parak very short. Okay, Erev Pesachim Samach Mincha. On Erev Pesach, very close to Mincha, Lo Yochel Adam Ad Shetachshach. A person should not eat until it's dark. I want to point out to you what we're talking about over here. When you wake up on Erev Pesach in the morning, right over here, at this point, at 4 hours into the day, you're not allowed to eat your chametz, right? We go burn the chametz. By 6 hours, it's the raisa not to bring the chametz. By 6.5 hours, usually into the day, which is about, let's say, 12:30, and a day that goes from 6 to 6 by equinox, that's usually when they used to bring the tamid shel bein harabayim. That's called mincha gedola. You know why it's called mincha gedola? Not many people know this, but it's called mincha gedola is because there's a long time till you get to tzeisak kachavim. And on Erev Pesach, taka they would bring the tamid shel bein harabayim so that everybody could bring their carbon pesachs. But on a normal day, they brought the tamid shel bein harabayim by mincha katana when there's just a little bit amount of time until tzeisak kachavim, which is 9.5 hours, and today about 3:30, let's call it. So our Mishnah just said, very important, at this point, samach lemincha, about a half hour before mincha ketana, about 3 o'clock, one is not allowed to eat. You're supposed to starve. You're not allowed to eat until it gets dark. Why is that so? So Rashi explains, because there's a mitzvah to eat the matzah with a hearty appetite, and therefore you should stop eating already from away in the early afternoon by 3:30. So at night you'll eat that matzah shel mitzvah with a hearty appetite. So 2 points over here. One is, what aren't you now allowed to eat? It's a very good question. V'im Taimer, Taisus points out, what is the Mishnah talking about? What can't I eat? Can I eat a fruit? If it's talking about matzah, right? If it's talking about you're not allowed to eat matzah, well, matzah you're not allowed to eat already from what hour? For matzah already you're not allowed to eat in the morning already. Matzah we're not allowed to eat. Bread you stopped eating over here at the 4th hour. So what are we talking about over here? Because the Mishnah says, if we eat matzah on Erev Pesach, the Mishnah says, I like this. If you like have relations with your engaged girl while before the marriage, in other words, you couldn't hold out and you had you slept with her like it's done in America. So if you eat matzah on Erev Pesach, we tell the person, "What do you do it now? You have to wait till night." So it's a beautiful, you appreciate it. So certainly you're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. And our minig, I think most of the people here minig is that we don't eat matzah ready from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So it's certainly not, you're not eating matzah. And what about fruits? dried fruit, that's permitted. The Mishnah says later, the Gemara says later, you could eat fruits, a little snack. So Taisha says that we're talking about over here, matzah ashira, egg matzah. That egg matzah is something that you cannot be used to be yotza at night. So it cannot be used as your Seder matzah. So it's a special type of matzah that was not usher to eat, and that's what we're talking about. So it's very interesting that the Mishnah is talking about that particular food you're not allowed to eat in Erev Pesach in order so that you have an appetite. Basically, don't eat carbs. Then the Mishnah says, I will point out one other point. The Mishnah talks about Erev Pesachim. That's Erev Pesachim, but the parak is called Arvei Pesachim. It's a question of what, and the Rashbam had a girsa Arvei Pesachim. What does that mean? So it could be, what's the plural? Arvei is plural, Erev is singular. So normally it could mean Erev Pesachim means the Erev of the many Pesachs throughout, the time. But when you garis Arvei Pesachim, Taisus wants to say that even on Pesach Sheni, any Erev Pesach, not only Erev Pesach Rishon you're not allowed to eat, but also Erev Pesach Sheni you're not allowed to eat, which is very interesting. Then the Mishnah says, "Afila oni shebi Yisrael lo yochel ad sheyaseh." Here is the fake it till you make it. In other words, a poor person who's broke and he just barely could afford the Seder, he's not allowed to eat at the Seder until he does reclining, because he might think, well, this doesn't apply to me because I have such a hard life. The answer is no, he's not allowed to eat. He has to make sure that he has a seba reclining during his Seder. Now, the owner of the tzedakah has to make sure that he has 4 cups of wine. That means the guy that's giving out the tzedakah has to make sure that everybody could afford 4 cups of wine, right? That is the lesson to the owner. So that's the third thing the Mishnah discusses. And then there's a fourth thing, vafilu min hatamchui. Here's a very interesting thing. Even if a person is homeless, basically, tamchui is a person who takes from the public plate, from the food bank and the public food bank. And even if a person's like that, you might think that he and the gabbai, let's say there's no tzedakah, they don't have enough money to give him 4 cups of wine. You would think he's pater. So the answer is no. No matter how poor he is, he has to work and find a way to borrow or do any menial job so that he can get the 4 cups of wine. So there's no excuse for somebody not leaning, no excuse for somebody not having 4 cups of wine, even if you can't get it from the tzedakah. You have to, go back to work. So the Gemara says, the Gemara asks one question. My iri Arvei Pesachim. Why do you tell me that Erev Pesach one is not allowed to eat? Erev Pesach you're not allowed to eat. Afila Arvei Shabbosus v'Yomim Tovim, even on Erev Shabbos and Yom Tiv, right? Even Erev Shabbos v'Yom Tiv, Name, also you're not allowed to eat. In other words, you tell me on Erev Pesach you're not allowed to eat because you should be able to eat the matzah with te'avoin. On a regular Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to have this big toyameh, chal and kugel and fill yourself up. You have to come to Kiddush with a nice appetite. Look what the Rashbam says. Kedei shehei Kiddush usuda Shabbos chavav. It should come with some type of desire, looking forward for that Friday night meal. I can't understand how they distribute the kind of Shabbos food to people to break, to have a party on Friday afternoon. It says you're not supposed to. The Tanya we learned in the Brayso, a person's not allowed to eat from Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov from Mincha and onwards. Today, Shabbos so you could go into Shabbos with an appetite. Rabbi Yehuda. So right away, there's a question against our Mishnah against Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, it's not such a problem. You could eat until it gets dark. So the Gemara is asking a question: how does our Mishnah align itself with Rabbi Yehuda? So the answer is Rav Huna. Rav Huna gives one answer, and he says our Mishnah does not align itself with Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no a chiddush of Erev Pesach because every Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, you're not allowed to eat. It's not needed according to Rabbi Yehuda. Tzricha ela Rabbi Yossi. You need it to teach you Rabbi Yossi. The Amar, Rabbi Yossi said, on every Erev Shabbos, oichel v'hoitlech achetechsach. You can eat until it's dark. Hani Mili, when was that said? Arvei Shabbos of Yom Tovim. On Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, Taka. You eat until it gets dark. Avo be'erev Pesach, even Rabbi Yossi would agree, because matzah is daraisa. You should chiyuv the matzah, maida, because of the honor of matzah, he would be maida. He would agree that you have to eat. Then Rav Papa gives a next teretz. Rav Papa says, afilu teima Rabbi Yehuda. If you want, you can say our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. How? Even Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Hossam over there. When Arvei Shabbos of Yom Tovim, an irregular Erev Shabbos Yom Tov, mina mincha ulamalahu da aser. From exactly mincha and on with its aser. Samach lemincha shari. Close to mincha, it's permitted. In other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda, on Erev Shabbos from 9.5 hours, this point and on, you're not allowed to eat. But before then, you're allowed to. On Erev Pesach, there's an extra chumah of samach lemincha. This little extra half hour, we start at 9. That is unique to Erev Pesach. So our Mishnah could align itself with according to Rabbi Yehuda. So let's read it again. I feel the Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah could align itself even according to Rabbi Yehuda. From exactly mincha above, it's not permitted to eat. Samach lemincha, half hour before, shari, it's permitted. Avo be'erev Pesach, on Erev Pesach, afilu samach lemincha, nami also at Erev Pesach, even close to mincha, half hour before mincha, it is also asur. That is the whole discussion today. But we will get back to this from at this point onwards tomorrow, Bezos Hashem, where the Gemara takes issue with Rav Papa's teretz. So just remember this point. At this point, you have Rav Huna and Rav Papa. On Erev Shabbos, Rav Yossi says nightfall. You could eat up until nightfall. Rabbi Yehuda says close to nightfall you're not allowed to eat. And on Erev, so the Rav Huda's teretz is Rav Yossi would be maida that Erev Pesach close to nightfall and close to nightfall, you close to Erev Pesach you're not allowed to eat. According to Rav Papa, no. Even Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said only by mincha you're not allowed to eat, by Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov. By Erev Pesach we go one step further, even close to mincha, a half hour before mincha you're not allowed to eat, and that so therefore our Mishnah could also align itself according to Rabbi Yehuda. So we're stopping right here.
I always remember.
You.
Yeah.
I always remember in yeshiva that on Eretz Yisrael that people would not eat Pesach. They would not have on Friday or Shabbos. They would not eat anything. And now we have these things where.
Apparently, you didn't go to a Pesach program. They start off with the opening barbecue right after.
Well, I don't know. This whole Toya Meha thing. That was for the guests that were traveling, arriving from Bar Mitzvah. They're staying by guests. They want to make sure they were fed before everything started. That's the concept of Toya Meha. But like it really, everything as usual was taken out of control and overdone to death. But
I think so. I know that just on an Erev Shabbos, if you go to a Hasidic mikvah, on Erev Shabbos, you'll find that there's somebody has a hot plate of cholent and kugel there.
Right. The whole spread there. Huh? Yeah.
The whole spread there. It's not a good thing. But that's the chisaron of a Pesach program, because they don't want the guests to be angry Erev Pesach when they come down to the dining room. There's no snack. So
they can't be hangry. Yeah.
They can't be angry. They just got there. So they'll have a whole plate with meats and
I've seen videos that it's not even normal, the stuff. I mean, it's like a ballroom that's set up with more food than you've seen in your entire life, and that's Erev Pesach.
That's the appetizer. Yeah.
Right. It's a takeover.
It's a week's worth of food.
Right. It's a cruise ship. That's basically what they're trying to mimic. You're on a Jewish cruise ship.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been there, but I'm telling you,
I've never been a cruise ship, but I know what they're.
No, I've never been to a Pesach program either, so I know. But
this
I
is
saw
the big
pictures.
Problem. Right. So this is the first lesson we learned, that you got to come very hungry to that Pesach Seder.
That's right.
And that's what I try. All right, I try to convince my kids. They're kvetchy and they start eating these lady fingers and they become.
No.
The Yetzer Hara gets to you.
If you eat the shiurim, you won't be hungry. If you do it properly, you'll be full.
Right.
Just
Right,
drop
but
the
it's
meal.
late. Remember, from now
Right.
on, we set the clock.
Right.
It's been from now on for the last, since we moved when
Right.
we set the clock. It's going to be for the rest of your life. It's going to be after Pesach's going to be after we
After-
set the clock.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to be sitting to eat your first bite of matzah till
Till
Probably
late.
10.
o'clock.
Yeah. And I'm going to Florida, so it's going to be even an hour later.
Oh,
'cause
yeah,
the sun's
right. You're
there.
out later. Right. The sun's
It's an hour later there almost. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Such sacrifices we have to make. Yeah.
Yep. It's
Poor
fascinating.
Shlomo.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think of us.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right, have a good night.
Good night,
Have a
everybody.
good night. Bye. Bye.